Hello and welcome to the Grove Church Podcast. I'm Charlie Lofton, the lead pastor there, and we are so glad that you are joining us. Whether you are a member and you're just catching up on a sermon that you missed, or you're someone who's brand new, we are really glad that you are joining us. And if you are new in some way, and I know that a lot of people will do that, will listen to sermons first before they visit, I want you to know that we would love to meet you at any point. You can join us live in our services on Sunday, 9 and 10:30, or our streaming service at 10:30. Either way, we would love to be able to get to know you. And regardless of why you are here listening to this sermon today, thank you so much for joining us. Hey, good morning. If you're new, I'm Charlie. I'm the lead pastor here and really glad you are worshiping with us today. And if you are new, I'd love to meet you after the service. I'll be back there at the back at a table we call First Steps. Got a gift I'd love to give you. I'd just love to meet you if that's what you would like. And like Mark mentioned, we are starting a new series today. And we're just going to spend some time over the next 3 weeks just kind of talking about really the importance of the gospel as far as what it is that God has called us to do as a church. And so we're going to spend some time just kind of refreshing ourselves on kind of some key aspects of things that God has called us to as a church. And kind of parallel to that, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock right here, child care provider, we're going to have kind of a town hall meeting where we just kind of spend some time just kind of talking about where we are as a church, kind of a little more logistically, administratively, those kinds of things. So I'd encourage you to be a part of that as well. And so as we kick off this series and we're thinking about God, who it is that God's called us to be, it's kind of got me thinking just about the way that I view people, the way that we view people, the way that we're supposed to view people. And there's a game that I play, and I don't know if any of you are like this, or maybe I'm just completely and totally weird. Like if I see what looks like kind of an odd, like group of people come in, I try to figure out, okay, who are they? How are they related to each other? I mean, you see two people in their 30s and two little kids, you're like, obviously that's a family, right? But like, for example, just even like, clearly that's grandparents and you got two sets of adults and a bunch of kids. Is it two brothers, brother and sister? Who do you think is related? Like, my brain's always trying to figure this out. Even just very recently, we were at this restaurant Friday night, and there was a couple at the bar right here, clearly on a date. Wasn't their first date because they were holding hands, but not for very long. But they haven't been dating very long. There was no ring. I noticed that, right? And I looked at Heidi. He's like, how many dates do you think they've been on? And she's like, why? And so then I say, she's not wearing a ring. They were holding hands, so it's not first. But, and this is a shot at guys a little bit, he was absolutely fascinated and 100% locked in. Sorry, guys. That means it's not very long, right? I mean, you could also tell that this dude, he thinks he's the luckiest guy in that room. He's like I had it at three. Anyways, so this is what I do, and I do this all the time. And so if you're having a meal with me or whatever, having lunch, or my staff are with me, Chick-fil-A or whatever, I do it. And you want to know who hates it? Matt Vaughn. You should ask him about it. He absolutely hates it. I say, hey, what do you think their story is? And he goes, please stop. Anna, our worship leader, she absolutely loves it. We have a great time together. And and the more I did this, I used to think, what do people see when they would see our family walking in? Especially a long time ago. Because there was a time when my wife and I were both 41, and despite what you might think, how young she looks, we are in fact the same age. And she will object to that she is 7 months younger than me. We are the same age. So we're both 41. At this point, we have a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And so that walks in, you're playing this game, like, what's their story? Maylee, our oldest, would say, I'll tell you what they thought. Teen mom, right? They all thought she was the mom. And so I wondered this, and then I got a glimpse of it, and it was not a good glimpse. We were at this Mexican restaurant in Texas. It's me, my 41 at the time year-old wife, who is the same age as me. I can't emphasize this enough. 15-year-old, 12-year-old, 1-year-old. We're all there. My wife orders something to drink. And the waitress says, may I see your ID? Which I'm sure is nothing but a compliment for her, right? It's a great compliment to be thought of. Hey, there's a chance that I may not be 21, but I'm thinking, what does this waitress think is going on here? There's me, my teenage daughters. my 3 teenage daughters, there's one daughter who may or may not be 21, and the baby, whose is the baby? It was like, I'm sure my wife felt great about it. I did not feel great about it, right? And so I'm playing this game, but also there's this thing that I do that's way worse than this. When I think about people, and I know that it's not universal, but it is common enough where I don't feel too bad about myself saying it, where you start to get kind of conspiratorial thoughts, like people like are intentionally trying to get in your way. I get this the most at Disney World. And at some point I can do a whole bit about this, but there's a handful of walking things that people do. There's the diagonal walker, like this is you. Like, that wasn't necessary. Or you're walking in front and all of a sudden they go, now's a great place to stop. Or just to turn around and headbutt you. And I'm like, we got places to go. And I'm beginning to think, are you there on purpose? Because then as soon as one of them does, I come finally around that person. Another one comes like, did y'all plan this? Sometimes it feels very coordinated. And I feel like this sometimes when I'm driving. The people are out to get me, right? You're annoying me on purpose. You're annoying me on purpose. I don't know why, but you are. And we can kind of get a really kind of selfish view of people. And we begin to start really thinking of people only in terms of, are they doing me good or are they doing me harm? And we have this very self-centered kind of view of others. And the reality of it is, what God has called us to be as a church and as individuals within His church is to be people who look at people and the world very, very differently. Because there's a mission that God has given us. He has called us to be hope, life, light, to salt of the earth. He has called us to bring these things to people, to bring hope, to bring Jesus to a world that needs. And so we begin to think of people not as what can they do for me or are they out to get me, but what can I do for them? How can I play the role that God has called me to bring hope and life to people, to bring Jesus to people? And I think sometimes we think of it almost exclusively in terms of nice things that we can do, but there is a core element of something that God has called us to do that I want us to spend some time these next few weeks. And again, we'll talk about it some more tomorrow as well. Kind of recapturing, recentering ourselves around this idea that God has called us as a church to share the gospel with people. He's called us to share the gospel, to let people know that there is hope that is found only in Jesus, and we need to be telling them about Jesus. That this is one of the absolute core missions of what God has called us to, is to take the message and the hope and the light and life of Jesus to a world that is desperate for it. So He's called us to do this. He wants us to do it. And so sometimes we get stuck a little bit on the how and what's it supposed to look like. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at a story where Jesus does exactly that. He, as the Messiah, as the one who has the hope in Himself, is bringing that message of hope to someone. And I think there's a lot we can learn from this story, and we can get some really good principles from this about who it is that God has called us to be as a church and as individuals. And the story is commonly referred to as Jesus and the woman at the well, and it is an incredible story of Jesus bringing the hope and compassion of the gospel to someone who is desperate for it. So let's just look at this story. We're going to break it up into sections here. John chapter 4, and we'll start verse 1. Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that He was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. Although, in fact, it was not Jesus who baptized, but His disciples. So He left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now He had to go through Samaria. So He came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as He was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. Now, there's a couple of elements to this story. We have not met the woman at the well. She is about to come up to Jesus right now. The next thing that's going to happen is that this woman is going to appear. But there are a couple of elements to the kind of just even to the preamble of this story here that feel like, maybe to us, like insignificant details, But that's because we live 2,000 years later on the other side of the world in a completely different culture and a completely different climate. But would not have escaped anyone who read this when John wrote it 2,000 years ago. Because there are a couple of elements to this story that I believe that make it very clear that this was not just some accidental encounter that Jesus had with this woman, at the Samaritan woman who was at the well. In fact, the way that Jesus is bringing hope to her, and I think this is one of the principles that we need to kind of learn from, is that the way that Jesus is sharing here, there's intentionality to it. He's doing this intentionally. And I want to make this point, I want to make this clear to you by kind of helping you understand kind of some things that we don't notice, but someone else who was reading this 2,000 years ago would have. The first one is, it says in verse 4, he's here, he's wanting to go here, and it says, now he had to go through Samaria, which is right here. And you may look at that, if you looked at a map, it's like, duh, that's how you get it. If you're trying to get from here to here, you got to go this way. This is where Samaria is. You got to go this way. But there is a lot of racial and political tension that exists between Jewish people and Samaritan people. They avoided each other as much as they possibly could. There was a deep-seated, centuries-old rivalry and hatred that existed here. For our purposes today, the what's and whys of that don't really matter. It's just important for you to know it. And so, when Jewish people were traveling from here to here, they always went this way. So if you were to say, and Jesus had to go through Samaria, you'd be like, bro, no, he did not. He didn't. But so someone who was reading this or hearing this story would have heard that differently. He had to go through Samaria. Your instinct would be, well, there's not a logistical reason that he would have to, because you don't technically have to. There was some compulsion outside of geography that made it where he had to. For example, and this is going to date me because I'm old enough to remember and know and have lived when I-49 did not exist. So if you were making the journey between Little Rock, Central Arkansas, and Fayetteville, there's a couple of different ways you could go. You could take 40 all the way to 71 and snake up that way. Or you could take what still exists, the pig trail, right? You know the pig trail? Yeah. See, I'm old. It's just kind of really cool little up the mountain kind of path there. You go through Elkins, you go through a little Job Corps place, and it's a really beautiful drive. And people who make that drive knew it was a little more windy and a little more slow driving, but it was in fact quicker. Now, if I were to say now, hey, I'm going to Little Rock, I have to take the pig trail. You're like, well, you don't have to take the pig trail. You would know if I said that, man, I've got to take it. You would know I would have some emotional reason. Maybe there's somebody there I need to see on the way. Maybe I'm just looking for something just a little more leisurely and casual. Maybe I'm a fan of beautiful scenic drives. But so if I had to do that, you would know something was different. It's not, you don't have to. So he had to do this, which makes a very strong case that this was a planned encounter. He knew that there was someone there in this town that he needed to bring hope and life to. So he was with intentionality going there. And it also says that he went to the well at noon. Again, not being people who have to gather their own water every day, and certainly not people who live in a desert. There's a couple things you need to understand about this, is that if you had to go out to a well, you live in this kind of desert kind of environment, and you had to go to a well every day to get your water, the time of day that you would go to get the water is first thing in the morning, 6 a.m., 7 a.m., whenever it is that you get up. That is when everyone goes to. No one is going to a well to get water at the hottest part of the day. But Jesus, because he was being very intentional, he knew that there was one woman who was going to be there at noon that day. And that there was a reason why. If there was going to be a woman that was going to, on a regular basis, come to collect the water for her daily needs at the hottest time of the day, when no one else is going to be there, you have to understand there's a reason for that. And so Jesus' encounter with her was planned. It was geographically, he was beelining for it, and he picked a time to meet someone who he knew would be there and had a very specific need, because someone who is doing this at noon at the hottest time of the day, she's doing everything that she can to avoid all of the people who are there at 6 and 7 a.m. There's whispers, there's gossip, there's something about her that makes her feel like she is a social outcast, like she doesn't belong. And it would just be simpler and easier for me to get water at the worst time of day than have to be around all of the people. Some of you antisocial people may be thinking I would make that trade 10 out of 10 times, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about someone who just hates people. We're talking about someone who just, in her heart, in her own life, I just can't. And so it was with real intentionality that Jesus comes to her and plans this very particular encounter with her. So again, it says here, he gets to the well. It's about noon, verse 7. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Sir, the woman said, "You have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water, welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." So she comes to the place at the exact time that Jesus knew she would, again, showing some intentionality. Jesus was not waiting for opportunities to develop, not waiting for someone to come to him and say, "I need help." He was creating opportunities. He had active eyes, active heart, looking for people. Sometimes I think we're waiting for somebody to come to us, and he's calling us to go out to find the people that we know need him. So there's intentionality there. But there's also just a real beauty here in the way that Jesus handles this. And again, we've already talked about this great divide between Samaritans and Jewish people. Jewish people thought they were significantly better. Samaritans were second class. And you add the gender to it, that he's a man, she's a woman. There's this huge gap, and we see this beauty of what Jesus does. And the first thing that he says to her, he doesn't start preaching at her. He asks her for a favor, which shows an incredible amount of love and humility. And you may think, I don't necessarily understand that. But if you think about this gap, he's got everything, she's nothing. You would not go to somebody who is nothing and say, "I need something from you." That was a gesture of kindness, of humility, and of just kind of breaking things down that would normally keep them from being able to have a relationship. It's a beautiful moment. And then in talking to her, he uses this metaphor of living water. Hey, can I have some water? How would you even think you want to get water? It's like, you don't understand. I've got this incredible water, and it is a water that if you have it, you'll never thirst again. She's like, I would love that water. And that is such a creative metaphor. And so the way that he is kind to her, gentle to her, and the creativity of this water metaphor, then not only is he being intentional, but he is sharing the gospel creatively and personally. He's being creative, he's being personal with her. And you may think, man, it's really not that creative a metaphor, that somehow, spiritual refreshment is the same as water. I mean, it's been around for 2,000 years. Right? I mean, right, 2,000 years. Jesus, he was the one. He is the one that brings this. And he brings it, and it's not only a creative metaphor for the life that he can give, but it is very intentional and personal to her. Because she is there at this well, literally trying to gather the water to quench her thirst. And he proposes to her, I have something that you need that will quench that thirst. Like, I would love that. And I have it where if you got it, you would never have thirst again. You would never need, it is a living water. And now all of a sudden she's connecting dots. She's very literal at this point. She's still thinking about water. It's like, not only would this quench my thirst, but now it's being tied into her emotional needs, her real felt needs. Because not only is she physically thirsty, but she is somehow, we don't know yet, kind of broken and isolated. And her having to come to this well every day at either the worst part of the day or have to deal with all the people judging her at the earliest parts of the day is a deep hunger and thirst there too. And Jesus is saying, I can meet those needs for you. And she is absolutely drawn to it. Give me that. I would love to not only not be thirsty, but I would love to not have to deal with the pain that comes from coming here every day. The memories that I have of this, the hurt that I get from the judgmental looks or the isolation and fear I have by coming out here in the heat of the day every day. It is a reminder of something here. I would love that. And Jesus took the time to know her and to talk to her in a way that meant something to her. And so I was thinking, like, what would if Jesus were to craft a message unique for me, what would it be? What would it be? It's like, Charlie, I've got something for you. There we go. And if you have it, you're, as a tortured fan, your teams will never lose heartbreaking games again. I'd be like, give me some of that. And then he would switch it and be all spiritual on me. It's like, no, I want the Hogs to not lose. Anyways, it would be personal, like very personal, but really it would be, put that aside. It would be, I have something that if you took it, those voices in your head would be absolutely silent. The ones that tell you you're not good enough, the ones that fill you with anxiety and fear and dread, they're gone. If you drank this, you would never have that problem again. Give me all of that. That would be what I would want. That kind of this quenching of this thing that I just wish weren't. And that's what he's coming to her. This as a metaphor, not only for water versus spiritual life, but a metaphor for her life. This is just emblematic of the brokenness of her life. And you won't have to experience this anymore if you will just take this water that I'm offering you. And so she's like, I would love that. So he's got her now. She's taken the bait. She's in. She would say, sir, give me this water so that I don't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. And he continues, verse 16. He told her, go call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Sir, the woman said, I can see you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and is now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth. The woman said, I know the Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, am he. Now, the way that Jesus crafts all of this is just fascinating to me. I mean, he is the Son of God, but he's so incredible with words, such a great storyteller, such great with metaphors, and just great with just kind of the personalizing of this. But there's also this incredible thing that you see, especially if you, not only in this story, but just in the character of Jesus as you kind of look at him over the course of the four Gospels, is that he has this incredible balance that I think many of us struggle with, that when he communicates, he brings two different elements together. And John 1 actually talks about this, that he comes with truth and with love. He says the uncomfortable, necessary thing when it needs to be said, but always with a measure of compassion. And he somehow brings both of these things together. He's not only intentional and personal and creative, but he also shares the gospel with truth and love. He's not just all love and kindness, but he's also not just to punch you in the face. He brings both of them together. And it's interesting to me because when we look at Jesus, sometimes you look at Jesus and his character and the things that he does, you look at it and you think, man, I could never be that nice. I could never be that forgiving. I could never, in the face of all of that, keep my cool and be kind and gracious the way Jesus is. But really, just as often, I look at some of the things that Jesus said and the way they did, like, bro, I would never say that. Like me, I'm always trying to make people like me. I want there to be peace. I want everybody to be cool. We're cool. You like me. I like you. I'm trying to keep everybody good. I would never be hanging out with this woman and be like, hey, go get your husband. She's like, I don't have a husband. Yeah, that's right. You ain't got no husband. You've been married 5 times. And the man you're with right now, he's not your husband. Like, I'm what? Like, he punches when he needs to. He says things that, again, I don't necessarily feel comfortable saying. But it always is sandwiched around this kindness and grace and love, and he brings both of them together so beautifully. And I think sometimes we struggle with one or the other. Sometimes we struggle with everything. It all needs to be good. It's the gospel. It's called good news. It's only supposed to be good news. Well, good news is only good news when there's bad news that it's fixing, right? We talk about the gospel being saved. When you're saved, something bad has happened. If you need to be saved, if you need to be rescued, if you need to be brought back from the dead, all of these images that Jesus uses to describe the gospel. Good news becomes great news when it's saving you from worse news. When your house is on fire and someone comes and says, I'm here to save you, you're very thankful. On a random Tuesday and nothing's going on, somebody knocks on your door and like, I'm here to save you. And you're like, freak, and you close the door, right? He's here. Like, I know how deep the problem is. I know that you are struggling. I know that you are hurting. I know why you are hurting. And I know, just like you know, that at least in part, this is because of some decisions that you've made. You have become your own worst enemy. And I see that, and I know it, and that is what I want you to heal from. And suddenly we're not talking about, I don't have to come to this well anymore. And what does she do? She does what we all do if someone really gets at the heart of what's really going on inside here. Starts getting a little too personal, starts to figure out what really my brokenness is about and where it comes from. She immediately deflects. So, you Jews say you're supposed to worship in the temple. We say it's in this mountain where Moses used to be. Where do you say? So she's trying to suck him into this culture war that we're having. The equivalent would be if you're talking to someone about a real spiritual need that you have and how much you need Jesus, and you're kind of getting at the heart at it with them, and you're kind of really help them really see the struggles that they have, and they feel convicted, but they don't want to have this conversation anymore. They would say, so tell me real quick though, who did you vote for in the last election? And so I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about something else. And if you happen to give the wrong answer, now I can reclaim the moral superiority that you have now taken from me. And I don't have to think about all of this anymore. And Jesus' response to her is, listen, can you imagine that there's going to come a day where it is not going to matter who you voted for? Whether you were a Democrat or a Republican, it will not matter if you worship in this mountain. It will not matter if you worship here in this temple, because God is looking for a different kind of person altogether. Someone who lives above the civil controversies that exist here in this moment, in this one culture, at this one place in time, but is looking up here for people who, with their whole hearts and in full knowledge of who God really is, are his true worshipers. This is the gospel. And he says, and I am the Messiah, the one that you've been waiting for. I am he, and I'm here to explain all of this to you. And then what happens is she has this incredible moment where she puts her whole faith and hope and trust into Jesus, and then goes and gets people from the village to come back, and he does the same thing for her. Because Jesus is willing to come to her intentionally, purposefully, and with personal knowledge and love and creativity, and a willingness to not back away from what the hard truths, but also bringing them with a gentle kindness and love. Her life is transformed. And if you are here and you have never experienced the forgiveness and life and love that comes from that gospel, the forgiveness that Jesus Christ offers through his death on the cross, if you've never really experienced that, but you're just kind of here to kind of do church, to marginally get better, but you've never really made the gospel yours, pray today can be your day. And that for all of us, that we can kind of recenter ourselves as far as what it is that God has called us to do. And he has called us to be people who are with intentionality, with creativity, with love, with truth, with kindness, bringing the hope of the gospel to our community that is desperate for it. Let me pray. God, I thank you. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for the way that he just modeled real love. A willingness to really get at the heart of a matter. To not be distracted. But with real compassion and love and purpose, bring hope to the people in his world. And God, I pray as a church and as individuals, we would be the kind of people who do the same. Who are always looking for the people, God, that you have called us to love and to bring the hope of your gospel to. And again, we are so thankful for Jesus. His death on his cross that allows us to be forgiven. And his resurrection that conquered death. And God, I pray that we would all put our whole heart and faith and trust in that, in him. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Thanks again for joining us on our sermon podcast, and you can learn more about us at thegrovechurch.org. And if you go to thegrovechurch.org/connect, there's a form you could fill out. Just let us know that you've been listening. And if you want to dig deeper on some of these topics that we cover in our sermon podcast, or just in other issues of dealing with culture or theology, those kinds of things, you can check out our Cultivate podcast, which is on the same feed, however you found this particular podcast. So again, this is Charlie, the lead pastor at The Grove, and thank you so much for joining us.